There is no doubt in anyone's mind that Game 5 of the Philadelphia 76ers versus New York Knicks was the Tyrese Maxey game. That, as we expected here in the Philadelphia circles, that we're seeing Tyrese Maxey's stardom expand to the national stage. And it was cool to see some of the national pundits reflect on it. We got some interesting breakdown and comments that I want to get into regarding the future of Tyrese Maxey and kind of the perceptions of people to this point. So the one that I wanted to lead with here, shout out to Get Up, and that Andrea Carter here saying, quote, Tyrese Maxey has to be in the conversation for future face of the league. And to that I say, why not? That I do think we've undersold just how good this guy is. And that's even coming from a guy that I think has been among the highest on Tyrese Maxey as it comes. But we just watched this dude tear hearts out in Madison Square Garden, drop 46 points, carry the Sixers team on his back to a pure out victory. And beyond that, I saw a different Tyrese Maxey. That him pumping up the crowd, him pumping his chest, cursing people out, he's turning mean, and I mean that in the best way possible. That this isn't this childlike, fun guy having a ball, just playing basketball with his friends. This is a lock-in, focused killer on the basketball court. And I do think that is a notable stride in his game. And when speaking about his growth and this perception of how good can Tyrese Maxey truly be, I think that ceiling could not be higher. To just take a look at the guy who is quite literally the most improved player this year, take a look at these tangible growth that we've seen from a year in and year out standpoint. That as a rookie in these 61 games he played, just 15.3 minutes per game, averaged 8 points, 2 assists, 1.7 rebounds per game, and shot just 30.1% from beyond the three-point arc. Now we do know that was more about the Doc Rivers conversation of him not trusting Tyrese, less and less about Tyrese Maxey not being ready for the moment. But we started to see a little bit more of this in year 2, which of course was the Ben Simmons holdout where Maxey was thrust in the starting lineup. And if we're being completely honest here, we may not have seen this dude if that had not been the case. That due to how down on Doc Rivers is on young players, Maxey might have been held away. So shout out to Ben Simmons for that one. And in that year 2, in the 75 games that he did play, 74 of which he started, 35.3 minutes per game, Maxey produced 17.5 points, 4.3 assists, 3.2 rebounds, and where we saw the stride forward was as a three-point shooter. From a 30.1% three-point shooter to a 42.7% three-point shooter in his second year, that ranked top 5 in the NBA that year. And that is where we started to see these layers to his game grow. But that was the question about Tyrese Maxey coming out of college. Is he a good enough shooter? He did not. He shot 29.2% from beyond the three-point arc in college. That's not going to cut it at the NBA level. But luckily, Tyrese Maxey was well aware of that and able to answer that call. Now, in year 3 is where we begin to see Tyrese Maxey playing next to James Harden. Now, we see James Harden, and for whatever your feelings are on him, personally, I regard James Harden a little higher than most, purely from the standpoint of I'm very appreciative of how much Tyrese Maxey learned from James Harden. That it does not take an advanced eye to note the influence on his game that you can see. Some of these step backs, some of the way that he gets to his spots, there's very clear that veteran savvy that Harden provided to him. And shout out to Tyrese Maxey for soaking that up like a sponge. And in that year 3, in the 60 games that he played, 41 of which he started, Maxey played 33.6 minutes per game and saw his averages grow to 20.3 points, 3.5 assists, 2.9 rebounds, and saw that three-point numbers take an even further stride forward, shooting 43.4% on 6.2 attempts per game. That's when we realized that this shooting is legit. This dude is a real deal sniper, and that's where we started to see some other areas of his game develop. That the threat of the three-point shot is so tied to his success at getting downhill. That the calling card of Tyrese Maxey coming into the NBA is that he's probably the quickest dude in the entire league. That there's nobody that in a straight line, just quick burst, can run with Tyrese Maxey. So that always opened up that threat of being able to get downhill and get to the basket. And by the way, when he gets there, a quite electric just finishing array of moves. So that his finishing package, the way that he can spin it off the glass, I truly feel Kyrie Irving is the only player that to have a more wide-ranging variety there. That some of these up and unders and that Maxey does, and sometimes the way that he gets it such a quick burst and just kiss it off the glass, really impressive and advanced stuff. But we knew that he had that ability to get downhill. And then he provided this three-point threat. So now you have those two areas that people and opposing teams have to be worried about. And the threat of both opens up everything. That you can get to the mid-range, get to that floater, which he's loved since he came in the NBA. He truly is a 3-level scorer, and it's cool to see him develop into that quickly. Now, entering this season, we knew the James Harden holdout situation, and the biggest question that was asked was, can Tyrese Maxey be a true point guard? and he answered that call as well. And looking at the average for this year, 25.9 points per game, shot 6.2 assists, which is a career high, a huge stride forward there. Also 3.7 rebounds. He did see the 3-point percentage dip a little bit, shooting just 37.3% from beyond the arc on 8.1 attempts per game. While I'll also note that, that is still a pretty good 3-point number, that far above the league average there, at least definitely above the league average, which I believe sits around 35 for this season. Most of that is due to him having to force his shot, and his numbers statistically really went down when Joel Embiid was off the floor there. So I don't hold him too much to the fire there, but I'll bring this up to look at the tangible evidence of how much he's gotten better, how many areas of his game. And one area which I have not brought up is defensively, that for a large portion of his career to this point, Tyrese Maxey has been talked about as a weakness on the defensive end. That is no longer the case. That this dude competes. He's gotten way smarter in how to get his hands in places, how to get little tip-ins, pokes. We see some of these blocks from behind that look pretty Matisse Thybulle-esque, and cool to see him learn there. He competes. He knows where to be. He's a smart player, and he's turned himself into a plus defender. That is a huge deal when talking about the future of the Sixers team, where that's not a guy that you have to, be worried about on that end. That even this series with the Knicks, he's holding his own with Jalen Brunson. And I'm sure there's stats there. For the most part, Brunson hasn't done his damage against Maxey. Honestly, I'd point way more towards Kyle Lowry is probably the worst example there. Tobias Harris has had his battles as well. I think both Batum and Oubre have been fine on him, but I think Maxey has competed with Brunson just as well as you can possibly expect there. But there were a couple other quotes that I did want to dive into and break my thoughts on now. So a couple other of the national pundits here. First, this kind of feeding into this Tyrese Maxey face of the league conversation, that ESPN's Mike Greeny says, quote, "If the Sixers win the series, then this will be the Maxey game forever. This will be the night that a legitimate NBA superstar was born." I don't disagree there, but he's been born quite a bit ago. That he's 23 years old. He has been this dude you are just now seeing on the biggest stage. And to the face of the league conversation, I will also mention that I do think Tyrese Maxey is in the top 1% of just likable human beings. That I've never seen a person be capable of saying a bad word about this dude. And I mean that in all areas of the game. The way that he talks to people, deals with media, does his charity events, and just the infectious smile that he constantly carries himself with. So I do think that plays a factor, and one of the reasons why he is so likable. Now, of course, when these sorts of conversations happen, there always has to be a negative side. And people can't always look on the positive. There's always got to be this, opposite take to stir the pot here. And I did want to jump into that here. That from, I don't even know who said this exactly. ESPN Bobby's Marks says that Tyrese Maxey is the face of the Philadelphia 76ers. Quote, "I think he's the face of the franchise. I don't think it's Joel Embiid. I think Maxey is more reliable." And my pushback to here being, why do we got to go there? That no player can win a series on his own. No one player can carry a team just by themselves. So why aren't we celebrating that Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid can each do this rather than trying to pick this apart? And to use this exact same example here, you want to look at that Denver and Lakers series. Jamal Murray hit 2-game winners in that series. Are we now going, is the Nuggets Jamal Murray's team? Is Jamal Murray the face of the Denver Nuggets? No one is doing that, nor should they, because it's a ridiculous argument. So stop doing the same thing here with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And I did want to point out, and shout out to Andrea Carter once again. By the way, she's been crushing it with coverage lately. Her quote here, and she says, quote, "Maybe the story is Embiid has needed someone this whole time. Now he's got someone to take over, and this is who Embiid is." I don't mean this as a criticism to say that I do think there's a world where Joel Embiid is the guy, the innings eater, the guy that fills up majority of the production, and Tyrese Maxey could be the guy to take him home. I think there's a real world where there's a successful path for that to be productive. Now, with the Embiid conversation, I did mention he absolutely has to be better than he was last game, particularly on the offensive end. And 9 turnovers in a game just straight up can never happen. That can't, especially for an MVP caliber player. But I do think that there is something to Maxey being capable of fitting the exact role that Joel Embiid needs from a co-star. And I mean that on a lot of levels. For starters, Maxey's not afraid of the moment. We've seen that on full display. That he is a guy who wants the rock, wants to take the big shots, wants to have those moments for himself. That's important because even in the inherent disadvantages of having a center as your best player, there's just some looks that are difficult to create for Joel Embiid that'll be far easier for Tyrese Maxey. That when we know that, how Joel plays and when he gets to his spots, it's just not as easy for a 7'2" guy to try and create off the dribble or get into location in the way that it is for a guy like Maxey, who is capable of just outrunning guys or dribbling into spots at a rate their defenders cannot match. So I think from a statistical or more rather positional standpoint, there's value there. Now, on the other side of things, I do think the mentality is important. That when you look back to past failed Joel Embiid co-stars, Ben Simmons is the number one here, where you look at it as there was a little bit of a clash of whose team is this. Even James Harden, I don't think it was quite to that extent, but I don't think James Harden liked being the backseat guy to Joel Embiid. With Tyrese and Joel, it's a very much like a big brother, little brother relationship where Maxey absolutely respects Joel Embiid. He knows that this is still his team to an extent, but he also knows that they need each other. And I think that's awesome to see, and I think what is necessary from a mindset standpoint, that there's still respect there. This is not two guys competing for whose team this is, but there is a little bit of a pecking order, which I think is important to establish. And then, just from a pure skill standpoint, Tyrese Maxey's that dude, man, that he is capable, he's ready, and he's proving that he's flourishing in front of our very eyes, where we've seen plenty of guys in the same situation wilt down, unfortunately. So I do think that these two need each other. I do think the future is bright for Tyrese Maxey, and I'm very excited to see it catching the national attention that it does deserve. The Sixers are back in action for a Game 6, back home in Philadelphia. They're starting to crawl out of the 3-1 deficit that fell in, and I do think people are starting to believe. So Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, let's give them another reason to. We will see what happens then, but I do want to hear from you guys. So let me know your predictions for this Game 6. Should we clear our schedules for Saturday, make sure we're around and ready for what could be one of the greatest basketball games ever if it gets to that point, that I do believe this might legitimately be the best first-round series that I've ever watched in the NBA. It is frustrating that it is just a first-round series because I once again think both these teams, these are the second and third best teams in the East behind the Boston Celtics there. So it is disappointing one has to leave the dance now, but that's the way of the world. So regardless, shout out to you guys for tuning into this video here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button to keep the Digest family growing, dropping a like and any comments that you do have, and I'll be back breaking it down every step of the way. Peace.